Clarence House sits at the southwestern end of the mall. Cream stucco, 4 stories, designed by John Nash in 1827. Not especially large by royal standards. It's a townhouse, not a palace. And for 49 years, from 1953 until her death in 2002, it belonged to one woman. Elizabeth Angela Marguerite Bowes-Lyon, the Queen Mother, nation's grandmother, the woman who smiled through the Blitz and waved from every balcony, gin and Dubonnet in hand, hat perfectly angled, radiating a warmth so practiced it became indistinguishable from the real thing. She was also, according to multiple biographers and palace sources, the woman who gave her grandson a place to conduct his affair with Camilla Parker Bowles, in her own private apartments, in a building Diana, Princess of Wales, regularly visited, while Diana was upstairs. That detail, the proximity, the architecture of betrayal, changes everything about how we understand what happened to Diana Spencer. Not the affair.
You already know about the affair. Everyone on Earth knows about the affair.
This is about something the public was never meant to see. The woman who opened the door for Charles and Camilla, closed it behind them, and then went back to smiling for the cameras, while Diana tried to survive in the rooms above. Diana was 19 years old when she walked into this story. 19. The daughter of the 8th Earl Spencer, from a family with connections to the royal household so deep they were practically structural. Her father had served as equerry to both George VI and Elizabeth II. She'd grown up at Park House on the Sandringham estate, literally within sight of the royal residence. She knew the world she was entering. Or she thought she did. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known at 19, was that the warmest figure in that world, the smiling grandmother the whole nation adored, had already decided who Charles really belonged with, and it wasn't Diana. To understand why the Queen Mother did what she did to Diana, you have to go back 60 years, to a different woman, a different crisis, and a grudge so enormous it swallowed the Queen Mother's entire moral framework whole, and then spat out something unrecognizable. On the 11th of December, 1936, King Edward VIII abdicated the throne to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee. The crown fell to his brother Albert, who became George VI, and Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, who'd married the second son of a king with no expectation of ever becoming queen, was suddenly queen consort. Her husband suffered from a severe stammer. He was shy by temperament. He'd never been prepared for the role. He didn't want it. She didn't want it for him. But they got it anyway, because of Wallis. The Queen Mother never forgave her. Not once, not ever. This wasn't a private irritation that faded with time. It was a 6-decade campaign of exclusion, conducted with aristocratic precision. She refused to call Wallis Her Royal Highness, a title withheld at the abdication, a withholding the Queen Mother reportedly took active satisfaction in maintaining. She ensured the Duke and Duchess of Windsor were frozen out of family gatherings whenever she had influence over the guest list. When the Duke of Windsor died in May 1972, Wallis came to England for the funeral at St. George's Chapel, Windsor. She stayed briefly at Buckingham Palace. Contemporary accounts describe the Queen Mother's behavior toward her as formally correct, devoid of warmth, bone dry. There was no reconciliation, at any point. As late as the 1990s, according to members of her social circle quoted in biographical accounts, the Queen Mother's household knew the subject of Wallis Simpson was one you simply didn't raise. And the stated reason for all of this? Morality, propriety, divorce. Wallis had been married twice before. Her relationship with Edward had been adulterous before it was formalized. The Queen Mother framed her objection in terms of duty, propriety, and the damage done to the crown. Hold that thought. We're coming back to it. Because everything the Queen Mother claimed to despise about Wallis Simpson, she would go on to actively facilitate for her own grandson, in Diana's marriage, in Diana's house. George VI died on the 6th of February 1952 at the age of 56. The Queen Mother believed, and said privately, according to accounts cited by multiple biographers, that the strain of unwanted kingship had shortened his life. Wallis hadn't just stolen the throne, she'd stolen her husband's life. That's the wound. That's where the Queen Mother's worldview calcified into something immovable, something that would eventually grind Diana Spencer into dust. After her daughter Elizabeth's coronation on June 2, 1953, the Queen Mother moved into Clarence House. She was reportedly reluctant to leave Buckingham Palace, but she settled in. The building became her fortress, her court within the court. Ground floor: the morning room, the Lancaster room, the garden room, the library. Official entertaining: lunches with politicians, charity receptions. The public performance of warmth. Second floor: private apartments. Sitting rooms, bedrooms, personal quarters. Access controlled by her household, a fiercely loyal staff operating under her direct authority. And here's the architectural detail that matters. The building had multiple access points: a main entrance on the mall, service entrances from the rear and sides, internal staircases connecting the floors. The building's relatively compact footprint meant floors weren't fully insulated from one another. It's a townhouse, remember, not a palace. You can hear movement, doors closing, voices carrying. But the multiple access routes also meant that someone visiting the private apartments on the upper floors could arrive and depart without passing through the more visible public areas. Standard provision for a royal residence, unremarkable in any other context. Diana would learn the geography of this building intimately, and what she eventually discovered about what happened inside it would, according to her own butler's testimony, devastate her more than the affair itself. Charles, Prince of Wales, first met Camilla Shand in 1971. Jonathan Dimbleby, in his 1994 authorized biography, documented the relationship's early development and its interruption by Charles's naval service. Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles on the 4th of July, 1973, but according to Dimbleby's careful phrasing, their relationship never entirely ended. It resumed as a close friendship, then deepened again. Christopher Wilson, author of A Greater Love, Charles and Camilla, told The Telegraph in November 2019 that both the Queen Mother and Lord Mountbatten had played active roles in shaping Charles's romantic life during this period. Wilson described the Queen Mother as aware of the Camilla relationship from an early stage, and not hostile to it. Not hostile at all. Why would she approve of Camilla? Penny Junor's biographies of Charles and Camilla, drawn from extensive access to their circle, paint the picture clearly. The Queen Mother genuinely liked Camilla, found her easy, amusing, socially congruent in ways that mattered deeply in that world. Camilla's great-grandmother, Alice Keppel, had been the celebrated and, crucially, discreet mistress of Edward VII. Camilla's father, Major Bruce Shand, was a decorated war hero and wine merchant who moved in the Queen Mother's own social world. Camilla understood the rules. She knew how proximity to the crown worked. She wasn't going to cry in public. She wasn't going to make a scene. She wasn't going to be Wallis. And then there was Diana. Multiple biographers, including Wilson, report that the Queen Mother was among those who encouraged the match between Charles and Diana Spencer. Diana met a set of institutional criteria: aristocratic lineage, youth, no public romantic history. Charles had reservations. He was under significant family pressure. They married on 29th July, 1981, at St. Paul's Cathedral, before a global television audience estimated at 750 million. Diana was 20 years old on her wedding day. She was walking into a family that had already decided, at its most powerful level, that the man she was marrying belonged emotionally to someone else. The Queen Mother knew about Camilla. She'd known for years. She encouraged the marriage anyway. Think about that for a moment. Just sit with it. The difficulties didn't wait. Andrew Morton's Diana, Her True Story, published in June 1992, but based on Diana's own secretly tape-recorded testimony from 1991, documents that her bulimia started within weeks of the engagement.
Not the wedding, the engagement. Before she'd even made it to the altar.
She described overwhelming loneliness in those early months, emotional withdrawal from Charles that she couldn't understand and couldn't break through, and a growing awareness, detected through phone calls she overheard, a bracelet she found that Charles had bought for Camilla just days before the wedding, the quality of his attention when it flickered elsewhere, that Camilla Parker Bowles hadn't gone anywhere. Diana was 21 when Prince William was born on 21st of June, 1982, 23 when Prince Harry arrived on 15th of September, 1984. She was performing the precise function she'd been selected for, producing heirs, while simultaneously fighting an eating disorder, drowning in isolation, and slowly piecing together the architecture of her own betrayal. The Queen Mother watched all of this, and her response, according to every available source, was contempt.
According to Tina Brown's reporting in the Palace Papers, published in 2022, the Queen Mother viewed Diana's emotional displays, the tears, the evident unhappiness, her difficulty conforming to royal protocol, with increasing displeasure. Brown's sources, drawn from years of reporting on the royal family for Vanity Fair and The New Yorker, describe a Queen Mother who interpreted Diana's behavior not as evidence of someone's suffering, but as a failure to meet the obligations of her position. Not pain, insubordination. The most widely cited expression of this view is devastating in its brevity. The Queen Mother reportedly described Diana in private as someone who was fouling up everything the monarchy stood for. The exact phrasing varies between sources. Some render it as fouling up the monarchy, others as fouling up all the monarchy stands for. But the substance is consistent across broadsheet obituaries and biographical assessments published after her death on 30 March 2002. No source provides a specific date for the remark. It appears to reflect a view she expressed more than once during the late 1980s and early 1990s. Diana was fouling it up. Diana, the woman with bulimia, the woman who'd been pushed into a marriage with a man who loved someone else, the woman who was 22 years old and drowning. She was the problem. Not once, across the entire biographical literature, sympathetic and critical, authorized and unauthorized, is there a credible documented instance of the Queen Mother offering Diana comfort, intervening on her behalf within the family, acknowledging the legitimacy of her distress, pulling her aside, sitting her down, telling her it would be all right. Nothing. From the nation's grandmother, Diana received precisely nothing. But here's what Charles and Camilla received. They received rooms. Tom Bower's Rebel Prince, The Power, Passion, and Defiance of Prince Charles, published in March 2018, provides the most detailed account. Bower, an investigative biographer known for unauthorized portraits of powerful figures, conducted extensive interviews with current and former members of the royal household. His account describes Charles using the Queen Mother's hospitality and her residence as a space where the normal apparatus of royal scrutiny, staff records, diary entries, the visibility that attended his own residences at Kensington Palace and Highgrove, could be circumvented. Bower describes the Queen Mother's household providing a level of discretion that Charles's own staff couldn't guarantee.
He places the pattern of behavior within the mid-1980s through the early 1990s. The mid-1980s, when Diana was in her early 20s, when she was having children, when her bulimia was at its worst, when she was making visits to Clarence House for the family occasions and social calls expected of her as the Princess of Wales. Wilson's account, published in The Telegraph in November 2019, goes further. He described the Queen Mother not merely as aware of the continuing relationship, but as supportive of it. And he placed Clarence House specifically as a location where Charles and Camilla could meet with assured privacy, shielded by the Queen Mother's fiercely loyal household from outside observation. In a February 2023 piece, Wilson returned to the subject, emphasizing just how central the Queen Mother's relationship with Charles was to how the affair sustained itself across decades. Tina Brown's sources corroborate the broader picture. According to the Palace Papers, the Queen Mother regarded the Camilla relationship as a practical reality to be accommodated, not a scandal to be suppressed. Her worldview, Brown's sources suggest, accommodated discrete extramarital relationships as historically normal within the aristocracy and the royal family. An arrangement requiring management, not moral intervention. So picture Clarence House. 4 stories, cream stucco, the Queen Mother's loyal staff at the doors, Charles arriving through one of the side or rear entrances. No diary entry, no record, no scrutiny. Camilla arriving separately, the private apartments waiting on the second floor, and Diana, who visited this same building, who walked through these same halls, who sat in these same rooms for teas and family lunches. Diana, who was slowly, agonizingly realizing that the entire apparatus of the family she'd married into was aligned not with her, but against her. While Diana was upstairs, can we say she was literally upstairs on a specific documented date while Charles and Camilla were in the Queen Mother's apartments below? We have to be honest about this. Diana's primary residence was Kensington Palace, not Clarence House. She visited for family occasions and the social obligations that came with being Princess of Wales. None of the cited biographers, Bower, Wilson, Brown, provide a dated instance in which Diana was confirmed to be on one floor, whilst Charles and Camilla occupied another. What the sources establish is a pattern. The Queen Mother provided the venue, Charles and Camilla used it, and Diana's visits to the same building overlapped with the period during which this arrangement was active. The proximity is architectural and temporal. Paul Burrell alleges simultaneous presence. No independent corroboration exists for that specific claim. But the broader truth, the one Diana herself eventually grasped, is almost worse than the image of her sitting upstairs while it happened below. Because it means the betrayal wasn't a single afternoon. It was a system. A system with a building, a staff, a gatekeeper, and a grandmother who decided that Diana's suffering was less important than the institution's smooth operation. Paul Burrell, Diana's former butler, published his memoir, A Royal Duty, in 2003. His credibility is genuinely contested. He was charged with theft of Diana's possessions in 2002, and the case collapsed only after the Queen intervened with previously undisclosed information. His motives have been questioned by the royal family and by Diana's own relatives. But his descriptions of Diana's emotional state align broadly with the testimony Diana herself gave Morton. And Burrell described something specific: Diana's awareness that Charles was conducting his relationship with Camilla under the sheltering hospitality of the Queen Mother's home. Not just the affair, the family's collusion in it. That knowledge, according to Burrell, wounded Diana in a way the affair alone never could. The affair was Charles's betrayal. The rooms were the family's. And now comes the part that should make your stomach turn, because all those years the Queen Mother was facilitating Charles's affair with a married woman, providing rooms, providing staff discretion, providing the institutional cover that made it possible. She was simultaneously maintaining her 6-decade grudge against Wallis Simpson for being a divorcee, for moral impropriety. The same woman, the same lifetime, the same supposed principles. Wallis Simpson, a divorcee in a relationship with the king, was unforgivable. A moral catastrophe. A woman who deserved 60 years of ice-cold exclusion, who couldn't even be called by her proper title. But Charles, conducting an extramarital affair with a married woman while his wife suffered from bulimia and contemplated suicide, deserved private rooms, discreet staff, his grandmother's active protection. The moral framework didn't change. The Queen Mother's principles were perfectly consistent, just not the ones she claimed. Her objection to Wallis was never about divorce.
Never about propriety, never about morality. It was about damage to the crown. That's all it ever was. Wallis damaged the institution. She caused the abdication. She thrust an unwilling king onto the throne and, in the Queen Mother's view, killed him with the weight of it. Public disruption, institutional humiliation. That was the unforgivable sin. Camilla didn't damage the institution. Camilla was discreet. Camilla understood her role. Camilla was, by temperament and family history, great-granddaughter of Edward VII's famously invisible mistress, exactly the kind of woman who could exist alongside the monarchy without threatening it. The affair wasn't the problem. Being caught was the problem. Being loud about it was the problem. Being Wallis was the problem. And Diana? Diana was becoming Wallis. Not literally. She wasn't a divorcee trying to marry the heir. But she was doing the one thing the Queen Mother couldn't tolerate. She was making private pain public. She was letting the world see the cracks. She was fouling it all up. In 1992, the whole thing collapsed into public view. Morton's book landed in June, revealing through Diana's own words, though her direct participation wasn't confirmed until later, the full extent of her unhappiness, her bulimia, her suicide attempts, her awareness of Camilla. The separation was announced by Prime Minister John Major in December. Queen Elizabeth II called 1992 her annus horribilis. The Queen Mother's response, according to both Brown and Bower, was to regard Diana as the primary agent of damage, not Charles, who'd conducted a decade-long affair, not herself, who'd provided the rooms. Diana. Because Diana had done the unthinkable. She'd made private suffering visible. She'd cooperated with Morton. She'd spoken. From the Queen Mother's perspective, as reconstructed through those who observed her during this period, that public exposure was a betrayal of the institution categorically worse than any private affair. The same framework she'd applied to the abdication 56 years earlier. It's not what you do inside the house. It's whether anyone outside can hear it. On November 20th, 1995, Diana sat before BBC cameras for her Panorama interview with Martin Bashir. An estimated 22.8 million viewers watched. She was 34 years old. She'd spent 14 years inside a marriage that had been undermined by the family that arranged it. And she said the line that crystallized everything. There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. 3. Charles, Diana, Camilla. But there was a 4th presence Diana didn't name. The woman who'd provided the rooms. No documented response from the Queen Mother to the Panorama interview has been published. Biographers consistently report the royal family's collective fury, and the Queen Mother shared and reinforced that fury. Queen Elizabeth II wrote to both Charles and Diana in December 1995, advising them to divorce. The divorce was finalized on August 28, 1996. Diana, Princess of Wales, died on August 31, 1997, in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris. She was 36.
The Queen Mother, then 97, was at Balmoral with the rest of the family. According to members of her household cited in subsequent biographies, she was affected by the scale of public grief. But she did not, in any documented instance, express regret for her own role in Diana's unhappiness, or reconsider her assessment of Diana as a woman who had damaged the monarchy. The institution survived. In the Queen Mother's framework, that was the only metric that mattered. Diana hadn't survived, but Diana, in that framework, had chosen to be loud, and loudness was the sin. She lived nearly 5 more years. She died on 30 March 2002 at the Royal Lodge, Windsor, at the age of 101. Over 200,000 people filed past her coffin as it lay in state in Westminster Hall. The public tributes emphasized her wartime courage, her charm, her longevity, her role as the matriarch of the royal family. Nobody mentioned the rooms. Nobody mentioned Diana upstairs. Nobody mentioned Wallis Simpson's 60-year exile for doing less than what the Queen Mother had helped Charles do inside her own home. And then, the final act, the one that makes the architecture speak. Charles moved into Clarence House in 2003 after renovations reportedly costing several £1,000,000. Camilla moved in with him. They married on the 9th of April 2005 at Windsor Guildhall, 3 years to the day after the Queen Mother's funeral. The private apartments on the 2nd floor of Clarence House, the rooms where the Queen Mother had lived, where her household had provided discretion, where the affair had found its shelter, became the official home of the Prince of Wales and Camilla Parker Bowles. The rooms that had been a secret became the everyday. The arrangement that had been hidden behind loyal staff and multiple entrances became the acknowledged reality. Diana was gone. The Queen Mother was gone. But the building remained. Clarence House still stands at the end of the mall. Cream stucco, 4 stories, open to the public for guided tours during August, when the King and Queen are at Balmoral. Visitors walk through the ground floor reception rooms and admire the art. They don't go upstairs. The private apartments remain private. The monarchy is a house, and the people inside it are arranged by those with power, placed on the floors that suit the institution, regardless of who gets hurt. Diana Spencer walked into that house at 19 years old. She was placed where she was useful. She was ignored when she suffered. And below her, in rooms she wasn't meant to know about, the family she'd married into provided shelter for the very thing that was destroying her. The Queen Mother arranged the rooms. Diana was upstairs, and nobody opened the door to tell her what was happening below. Subscribe for more stories like this one.